Well, welcome. Tonight, we look at the world from the eyes of the liberals in our community. Let's start with introductions.
My name is Glenn Wyke, and I am the treasurer of the Milford Democratic Town Committee.
Christine Crane. I'm a member of the Democratic Town Committee and the State Committee, and chapter leader for Drinking Liberally.
And I'm Rand Barthel. I live in Mendon. I'm a member of the Mendon Democratic Town Committee, and I'm also a member of the 350 Mass Climate Advocacy Organization.
Where do we start? Glenn, pick a topic.
If you want to talk about tariffs, let's start there. Why not? We've had several instances where Trump has promised to impose a whole bunch of tariffs on different countries. Some countries who are only inhabited by penguins. It seems like his 90 deals in 90 days promise went by the wayside, and we're still waiting for any solid deal to be made. There's been some handshake discussions with the European Union, but Lord only knows what's going to happen there. But the fact is that the market has basically come to the conclusion that he's never really going to impose these tariffs, and for good reason, fully, because they're really a tax on the American people, and it's going to cause inflation. We'll see if he continues down this track, whether this is something that he really wants to do. He's talked about it a number of times over the years, not just during his presidency, but even beforehand. Even in his book, I believe, he talked about imposing tariffs. We'll see. But the results are not going to be good in the way he's implementing them. And
how so?
Because you have to match tariffs with an industrial plan. It's fine to want to have industry grow in the country, and it's fine to want to have factories built, and it's fine to want to have, cars fully made here, and or solar panels, or whatever it is that you think is a key industry for your country. But doing it in a blanket fashion like he is counterproductive. All it's going to do is raise prices on us, and then if there's no complementary industrial plan, you're not incentivizing industry to move back here. They have to do it on their own dime, or there is no real plan to do that. So they won't know also whether this is the permanent imposition of tariffs or not. Is this something that will outlast Trump's presidency, assuming there is another election and that Trump will leave office someday? Will that be the policy going forward?
He's got a constitution that he's got.
Oh, wait a minute.
He's doing everything he can to.
We'll talk about that.
He's doing everything he can to nullify that.
Yeah, right.
He is not following the Constitution.
No,
and
that's
we'll
not
talk
gonna
about
stop
that
him.
later. But the fact is that if I were a big business and in manufacturing, I would be very hesitant to do anything based on anything that Trump says, because he changes his mind constantly, and there is no firm policy or a plan behind any of it.
No.
But what do you think the ultimate goal is on this whole tariff?
I think the ultimate goals, like everything else that Trump does, are fundamentally corrupt. He is yo-yoing the economy and these tariffs up and down in order to
Make money.
Create conditions where he can pressure corporate leaders into lining his pocket through his crypto grift, and it's basically exerting control.
Yeah.
And it's not about. I don't think there is any real vision behind it that has anything to do with the public good. It's all.
Well, if he can bring jobs back to the U.S., isn't that for the public good?
Yeah, but that won't happen unless actual investment happens here, and as Glenn was just explaining, the far more likely outcome of blanket tariffs. Back in the 1930s, we had the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, which were blanket across the board tariffs, And they were called beggar thy neighbor tariffs because they ended up making the Great Depression much worse for the whole world. And you know, if what you do is just raising the cost of living for everybody and also making it harder for your own companies to make money by these blanket approaches, you are actually going to impede the economic development that you allegedly want to spur.
But you read about Japan's going to invest how many hundreds of billions of dollars in new plants? And
we'll see if that actually happens. You know, it's.
At least they're talking about it.
Well, at least they're talking about it.
Well, they have a lot of plants here already.
You know, and we actually were getting some progress on having more manufacturing of auto parts and EV batteries and other things through the Biden approach, which was the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, you know, things that were targeted and that were actually part of the beginnings of an industrial policy that said there are certain parts of the economy that we need to be active in and that we need domestic sources of supply in. And therefore, for strategic reasons and for future economic development reasons, and therefore we're going to have some targeted tariffs along with some targeted public policies to encourage those exact industries to develop. You know, putting tariffs on coffee that can't be grown in the United States anyway, it doesn't make any sense.
And you know, he complains a lot about Japan not buying our vehicles. Japan has a 0% tariff on our vehicles that go into their country. And the fact is that they're not buying our vehicles not because they're too expensive or because they have these huge tariffs on them or any other reason. They don't want big cars. They want electric vehicles or small vehicles. And if you ever look at the streets of Japan, all the vehicles are very small. And so we have a problem selling into that country because all our vehicles are huge. And they're gas guzzlers, many of them. And that's just not what they're looking for. So it's really more an issue of us not providing the Japanese market with what they want. And Trump, of course, is doing everything he can to undermine the EV industry and to empower automakers to make bigger, more gas-guzzling cars. It's counterproductive, and if we really want to sell into the Japanese market, if our automakers want to sell into that market, they have to provide them what they want.
Yeah, but isn't it more our trade imbalance versus specific markets?
What do you mean by trade imbalance?
Well, a lot of the countries that we're trading with are importing much less than they're exporting to us.
But there's no economic reason why a given country should always run a zero trade surplus or deficit with the United States. You know, some countries that we buy things from are very different from us. We have, you know, we buy a lot of T-shirts from Bangladesh, and you know they're a poor country that is making, you know, low margin things that require a lot of cheap labor to make, and we don't make that kind of stuff. We make a lot more expensive and high-tech stuff that they can't afford. It doesn't make sense to assume that under conditions of perfect economic justice, there would be a zero trade, there would be zero net trade imbalance between the United States and Bangladesh. The whole rationale that Trump has apparently used, although nobody can really be sure what his real rationale is, of trying to say, well, you know, we'll use the size of the trade imbalance to decide how much tariff to do, it does not make any economic sense. It's just it's stuff for the base, basically. It's not. It doesn't actually make any economic sense.
If you pick
There's not any great thinking going on behind any of this.
But you start looking at some of the big countries, Germany, France. Should we always be running a deficit?
Are we running a deficit with those countries all the time?
Well, it's hundreds of billions of dollars deficit with Europe in general. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would imagine since Germany's one of the leading economic drivers, we're not over-exporting to them.
Yeah. You know, yeah. Over time, we should be working to reduce that. And
I guess that's what I'm hoping this whole movement is.
yeah, and I think that there is a very low likelihood that that's what it's really about.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm considering the source and saying that most likely this is not motivated by any actual
Altruistic.
either comprehension
Wasn't
or
I
desire.
reading that last month we
to-
had the lowest trade deficit we've had in decades? Overall. I mean, I don't know
But what does that mean for the economy? And what does that mean for, everyday people?
well, I think it's probably because we can't afford to buy the goods that we were buying before.
or we're
or
buying
that-
less of them.
Or that yes, because many people bought in the first quarter of the year expecting the tariffs, and then they decided not to buy in the second quarter, and so
Right.
the trade balance shifted.
Yeah. So I bought a refrigerator and freezer in order to get ahead of the tariffs. And now, Carolyn and I have signed papers on a new EV to get in under the wire because the EV tax credit disappears on September 30th. So we are contributing to a temporary blip in these things that will look a lot worse after September 30th. And
Are we ready to move the economy to electric vehicles?
yes, it won't happen overnight, but the technology is there, and the infrastructure needs work, but it's getting better. But it's a question of as long as the infrastructure grows at the same rate that the EV adoption goes, there won't be a problem.
And I don't have any data, but it scares me to think I wouldn't go to an electric car right now because I'm scared I'm going to get stuck out in the middle of the woods with no charging station.
Well, I think those fears will go away over time as the charging stations become more prevalent. But
We can talk after the show because I've owned an EV for several years now, and a lot of people have fears that are overblown relative to the actual
And I'm
situation.
saying I don't have any data, but
Right.
I'm about to go to Penn State to see a football game.
Yep. There will not be a problem with charging stations on that route.
And
I
how
can
long does it
guarantee
take me to charge?
Well, it depends on what car you get. If you get one of the more modern ones that can tank up in 15 minutes, it takes a little bit longer than it does to fill your tank with dino juice, but
Yeah, but dino juice, I get frustrated at waiting a minute or two. If I have to wait 15 minutes at the electric.
well, do something during that time.
It'd be productive.
there's also, the issue of the technology changes that are happening right now, where new battery technologies are coming out, and that's going to extend the range of your battery to be 1,000 miles or 2,000 miles instead of just a couple hundred or 300 as it is.
I'm not
for many.
against electric vehicles at all. I just, from a practical point, I'm worried we're too early. I hear California with rolling blackouts or brownouts.
Well,
And
that
you get-
doesn't have anything to do with electric vehicles.
No, but if you changed everybody to electric vehicles, where would
it
you get
wouldn't-
the electricity from?
No, most charging happens at night when other demands are low.
Oh, okay.
It is a myth to think that electric vehicles will suddenly swamp the grid and cause everything to crash. That's just nonsense.
So what's the expectation with this administration in terms of supporting the electric vehicle? That's the scary part,
well-
for me anyway.
Well, they're in the pockets of the oil industry,
Right.
and they are doing.
You promise a lot of money to the oil administration, Patel?
I don't know about that. I
There
wouldn't be
was-
surprised. They're certainly cozying up to,
They contributed a lot to his campaign.
yeah, so.
And those are the people he does favors for. I mean,
Right,
that's who he
so-
listens to.
But that's politics in general, every administration.
But this is more extreme than in the past. Look at the people he's pardoned. I don't mean to jump around, but people that give him money, he's pardoned them.
The conservative movement is also doing some lawfare in that area. There was a movement on Wall Street to invest more in environmentally friendly technologies and get away from fossil fuels. And what the attorney generals of different states have done is said, if you do that, you can't invest in our bond markets anymore. And so they've pried those companies out of that position, including BlackRock and some other Wall Street firms who were involved with doing that. So they're basically what they're saying is you can't discriminate against fossil fuels. And so, so we're going backwards in
Yeah,
that
but
regard.
Doesn't the market usually take care of that? I mean, if you think about it, decades ago, your portfolio had to have tobacco companies in it
Mm-hmm.
because they were giving the best yields. Today,
Yeah, addiction is a good business model.
huh?
Addiction is a good business model.
But I mean, realistically, it just faded away.
Well, it faded away because of all the lawsuits and proof that they were lying about their product. And the oil industry has also been found to be lying about their product and causing damage to the entire world. And yet they're still out there making huge profits, and we've been thwarted in reining them in at all. Because they're too powerful and they own one political party here. And that political party, unfortunately, is owned by a lot of really bad people.
Well, and they actually own parts of the other political party
Well,
too.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, I was
too.
gonna
Politics
say-
in general,
But to
that's-
a lesser degree, I would say. But
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, that's true.
Yeah.
The pot questioning the color of the kettle
Yes.
makes me a little nervous.
Yeah.
But you know, even the environmental rules, I'm hearing that the EPA is being pulled back.
Oh, yeah,
The
big
EPA
time.
is being turned into the
On the other
opposite
hand,
of
I wonder why we're not standing up to China. They're building coal plants all over the place.
Well, they're also implementing solar and wind much faster than we are.
Trump is
much
saying,
faster.
Yeah, he's saying that there are no windmills in
They're-
China, but
their ultimate. They do have an industrial plan, and it's part of their plan to be top nation by probably about the middle of the century, and that does call for dominating all of the renewable energy technologies. They want to define the state of the art of solar panels, batteries, motors, rare earth elements, all of these things, and the supply chains that these things have.
Well, betting
And-
on a diminishing resource doesn't seem to be a long-term play.
Well, you could tell that to the oil companies also, but yeah. So what I'm saying though is that China has historically built a lot of coal-fired power plants because it was what they could build, but that's not their ultimate plan. Their ultimate plan actually is to dominate the energy technologies of the future. And as things stand now, with a minor bit of opposition to that from the Biden administration with the chips and with the Inflation Reduction Act, basically the political class and the financial elite of our country have basically offered no resistance to China's efforts. They're just executing business as usual, and we're not actually offering any opposition to it.
I love those terms, the Inflation Reduction Act,
Yeah.
when we were at 9% inflation.
Well, it
The
did
big-
reduce inflation.
Well, it took it from 2% to
Well,
9%.
at that
No,
time,
the other
no,
way. It
other
went
way around.
from 9% down to 2.5%, 3%.
The
Yeah, but
inflation
when the
happened
last
bef-
administration took over, it was 2%. It
Well,
went up
but
to
that-
9.
But it wasn't the Inflation Reduction Act that made it 9%.
And
The
it-
Inflation Reduction Act was enacted when it was 9%, and it brought it down to 3%.
Because just like now, this big, beautiful bill what does that mean?
That's a
It means
bullshit.
it means lots of people losing their health care so that we can preserve the tax
The tax cut.
cuts for the rich that Trump enacted in 2017.
and
Well,
will
tax
extend
cuts
it
by
permanently.
definition only go to 60% at best of the residents.
So,
Because 40% of the US pays no federal tax.
right,
So you can't have a tax cut. Well, yes, you can. I remember, I think it was
Right.
Obama's year when they did the tax rebate, and I got a kick out of it because I didn't qualify, my darling bride didn't qualify, my 2 daughters didn't qualify. The only one that qualified was my mother, who hadn't paid taxes in 5 years. So I get confused when they put these big, beautiful bill and Inflation Reduction Act labels.
well, and there's all kinds of other stuff in that legislation that we should be very concerned about, chiefly the funding of the implementation of the authoritarian police state with ICE and the concentration camps and all of that. And I know you're going to argue about
The label.
the label concentration camps. I'm going to insist on continuing to call them that because that's what they are.
They are indeed.
You know, they are, and they
How
fit.
else would you describe them?
You know, people are being crammed in cages
Deplorable conditions.
that are full of mosquitoes, that have poop on the floor because there is inadequate sanitation. You
I
know,
remember the cages when Trump first administration came out.
At the
Everyone was
border?
screaming about putting people in cages. And then they found out that was left over from the previous administration.
which is not to say that everything the previous administration
Right.
did was okay. But what we're seeing here is a mass application of this. They are
On steroids.
They've now got tens of billions of dollars to fund building these things all over the place. These, by the way, are
Private
run
sector.
by private for-profit companies
So who's making the money?
who
Follow
are
the money.
who are making money on the public dime, imprisoning
See,
people.
again, my own personal view, and I know it's not right, is that if you're convicted of a crime in the US, I have no problem with getting thrown out.
But being convicted
neither do
means
we.
getting due process, and
Yeah.
these people have not had due
Yeah,
process.
And that's,
So how is it right that
I mean,
they're
the
being
first
held?
raid in Milford that we heard about was around the churches. And everybody was saying ICE showed up and arrested all sorts of people. Well, I asked our police chief, because Robbie's always been a straight shooter with me. He's never lied to me. And I said, is that fact? He says, no. They had warrants for specific people, and they arrested the people with the warrants.
That has not been the case all the time, though.
No.
No, I'm just saying. I saw that in Milford. But then again, you got the young student.
Marcelo.
Yeah.
I don't like using names, but you know, you
It's
got the
all
young
over the
student
place.
that was a tragic mistake.
It wasn't a mistake. That's the problem. They
What was it?
couldn't get his father, so they got him. And they were perfectly fine grabbing him. They didn't have a warrant for him.
And they would have kept him if they could.
Yeah, if we didn't...
But the citizens won't allow that.
Well, and that's why we as citizens have to continue to not allow that, have to continue to
call
stand
it
up
out.
and call this out when we see it.
But the
and,
fact
and
is-
say, no, this is not okay.
Right.
The fact is that if we didn't make a big enough stink, they would have taken him
Sure.
and they would have deported him.
They were just about the numbers. They don't care who.
You know.
They have a quota that they, well,
Well, and they have bounties. They have
Yeah.
they have bonuses for making quota.
And who are they going to hire? These
They have
10,000
bonuses
people.
from
They
making-
have bonuses.
Yes, they do have bonuses
and
out.
bounties for making quota.
See, again, I related to Milford, where I think one of the best things we ever did is make it so that if a police officer writes a ticket, no benefit to the police department.
Absolutely.
You know, the money
that
goes
you're
into the general
introducing-
fund.
You're introducing corruption into the police department when you
Yeah.
make your salary
Incentivize.
contingent
Yeah, I mean,
on
there's
how
certain
many
certain
people
towns
you
around
arrest.
that have a reputation for,
Right.
don't drive fast, don't break the speed limit
Right.
by anything at the last
Right.
week of the month.
yeah, right, they
Right,
got to make their
right.
quota. I've heard
Got to
that
make the
too.
quota because their budget's depending on it.
Right.
Now, you could argue, and I've had people argue with me and say, well, it goes in the general fund, and the police department eventually get 5% or 6% of it next year. Yes, because they get funded through the general fund. But it makes me feel better that if they're writing tickets today, it's for safety,
That's right.
not for revenue.
That's right. Yeah.
But the ICE is a different animal completely, and that's been totally corrupted. And they justify what they do by labeling, we're making your streets safer. You know, that Christy Noon gets up there and
Well, if they focus on the
frames it that
1%
way.
Bad immigrants.
But they're not.
Well, define
But
bad.
that's a
Ones
people
who
commit
actually
rape,
commit crimes.
murder.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I
what
say
would hap-
1% because
1%.
they're no worse percentages than
then
American
how
citizens.
come-
We should
Right.
be focusing on the tiny percentage of human beings who do
Yes.
stuff like that, regardless of whether they are
Right, thank you.
immigrants or not. There is no basis for the belief that this is a special problem
That's right.
I'm
among
not going to
immigrants.
really care,
And-
and I may be being short-sighted, but if I'm being robbed, I don't really care if it's an American citizen or an immigrant.
But that's
Those are the
you.
last of your concerns.
Right.
Yeah, if somebody in my family's murdered, I have no problem focusing on the bad people.
So how come Trump is pardoning people who have had criminal records who've been convicted? They paid money into his fund, and they get.
Or
But every
else they just
administration does that.
committed the crimes out of loyalty to him, like the January 6th rioters.
This whole
Why is that
process
okay?
bothers me. It
It
bothered
should.
me in the last
It should bother you more.
administration when Biden pardoned his whole family in case they ever do anything.
Yeah, I don't agree with that either.
So to me, the whole process is flawed.
Well, I can understand why, while I don't like it that he did that, I can understand, given how much he knew about what was coming, I can understand why he did it. It's very sad that anybody on any end of the political spectrum would find it necessary to do something like that to protect their family because they are convinced that the incoming regime is going to be corruptly going after
Targeting
them.
You know, I would have had more respect for President Biden if he had just said, "It's my son.
He did say that.
That's why I'm pardoning him. No matter what he did, it's my son." And I can respect that because we all have kids. What wouldn't you do to protect your own child?
Yeah.
Well, even the prosecution of Hunter Biden was absurd. Most citizens would have gotten a fine for what he did. And instead, he was prosecuted and jailed. Why? Well, only because he was Biden's son.
Made an example out of
They
him.
made an example out of him. They went after him specifically to get to Joe Biden. There was really no reason to do all the things that they did. He paid the taxes that he owed, and the other issue was the gun for
No,
him.
but wasn't that just a lever, a mechanism to get him? It's
It
like
was.
it's like getting Al Capone on tax evasion.
Right.
You weren't going after Al Capone for tax evasion. That was just a lever you could use.
Right. But in the case of Al Capone was a well-known public menace, and you can understand using whatever you had available
To get him off the
to
streets.
get him off the street. Hunter Biden was not a public menace, was not a threat to anybody.
It was just a show. It was, Trump is into attention, media coverage.
Well, that's
and
his
control.
style. I mean, to me, Trump has a modus operandi that he goes in and shakes everything really hard and then makes deals with what falls out. You know. Tell me about this thing of ICE employees wearing masks, why it's such a big deal.
Well, somebody comes up, several armed men dressed up in combat
gear,
fatigues with assault rifles and masks over their faces, come up behind you and say, "Get down on your knees." Okay?
It's very intimidating.
How do you know that these guys are actually police officers?
They don't show their ID. They
But
don't
if
have.
How do you know?
if the goal is to identify them, then couldn't they be forced to wear a badge number?
They're not doing that either.
No, but I'm just saying, I can see with all the attention and a lot of the politicians are pushing to attack ICE, that I wouldn't want my face shown as an ICE officer either.
Well,
But I'd have no problem saying I'm number 3208,
so
so
how
if
are,
I do something wrong,
Why
You
are
can-
they hiding their faces?
I think
Yeah.
it's self-protection.
But even before people were attacking them or calling them out, they were hiding their faces. And that just heightened everything. I mean, that just made it worse.
Well, I
for them.
remember down when we were living on the boat on the Chesapeake, they had a problem with DEA. Because DEA had these black cigarette boats,
Mhm.
and they'd come screaming up the bay,
Mm-hmm.
pull up to a boat, armed guards pointing
Right.
guns, and the criminals started mimicking it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're calling out, I'm an officer of the court,
Right.
to rob people on the boat, and people started shooting back.
And that's-
Understandably.
Well, ICE is doing
that's,
that.
That's happening too.
We're-
There
we'll-
are imposters who are
We'll be seeing that.
Yeah.
who say they're immigration authorities, and they take people. In some cases, it's women, and they want to rape them or
Steal.
steal from them. It's happening already. These
Yeah.
imposters. So
And more of that is bound to happen.
yes,
Well,
it's
they're not-
guaranteed.
There's no accountability for the ICE. They don't show anything. They don't show an ID. They don't identify themselves.
I wonder how could you?
How could you what?
How could you show a badge?
Well, police officers do
badge
it.
with
Other
an age,
people,
sure.
yeah.
I mean,
What's the
But
problem?
police officers are in full uniform with their
Well,
name.
yeah, so why aren't ICE people
Right.
in that?
Why are they allowed to act like this?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because my problem with the whole thing is, if ICE, SPICE, NICE, not NICE, whatever group the government has, is abusing the power, I want a way of identifying them and
Yeah.
reporting them.
Because
sure.
otherwise, they're a secret police that are
Yes.
that are part of an authoritarian regime.
What does that sound like?
And they want to hire another 10,000 people, and we would like to know who those 10,000 people are. Are they going to be Proud Boys or militia people, or are they going to be just average citizens who want a job?
I wonder what the criteria for hiring them is.
Well, that's another
Probably
question.
politics to the right of Genghis Khan.
Correct.
And
Well, they can have politics anywhere they want as long as they follow the law.
yeah, but
But there's,
guys
now
don't.
that's the rub. The law. What is the law anymore? at
And
this
you
point?
know, we're seeing the Fourth and Fifth Amendment of the Constitution being
Eviscerated.
regularly violated by ICE.
Due
No
pro-
illegal search and seizure, forget it. They do it all the time. Imprisoning people without any due process happens all the time. So the Fourth and Fifth Amendments are meaningless now. If they're meaningless for the average immigrant on the street, they're meaningless for us too. They can do it to us too.
Where do you draw the line? Fair enough to say that's enough.
well, and
Unless
Well,
you carry
again-
your papers on you 24/7, you will not be protected.
Yeah, but carrying papers, if I'm illegal, I just have papers drawn up that look legal
Where? Where would you get that?
on my printer at home.
Right now, ICE
Even
doesn't
people
even
that
care
have-
about those papers.
But even people that have had ID, that have verified that their citizenship,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. They're still hold off. So what recourse do they have? Who's protecting them?
There are several citizens in Alligator Alcatraz, and some as young as 16. Does that sound good? I don't think so.
No, it doesn't sound good unless they're criminals.
Again,
But they're not,
no
Al.
due
You're not-
Yeah, I'm
process.
just
How do
saying.
you
you're not a
know?
criminal until you've been found guilty of a crime.
Exactly. And these people are not being found guilty of anything. They're just being snagged off the street, kidnapped, and thrown in these prisons.
Then how is it that 50% of the population voted for this?
50% of the
question.
population probably found it difficult to believe that this is what it would really take. Now,
But it's not 50% of the population, it's 50% of the registered voters.
Okay.
right,
And
that's
that's
an
a
important difference.
Still
And-
sounds like a lot of people.
Yeah,
There were a
Yeah.
lot of
But-
Latinos that voted for Trump thinking that, well, I've got citizenship, or I'm not a criminal, this is not going to happen to me. And a lot of them had a rude awakening. And they're really changing their position now. A number of people have come out and just been disappointed. They don't like, this is not what I voted for, was their attitude.
There are Native Americans getting seized because they look like people from south of the border.
But not criminal Native Americans.
No.
Criminal Native Americans, just people who look the way they look because their ancestors have been here for thousands of years, just like most of the ancestors of people to the south have.
Yeah, but I look like my father, an old Portuguese.
Yeah, it's great.
Are you saying I'm in danger?
No, I'm not saying you're in
No,
danger.
you're not dark enough.
So you're not dark enough and that really gets down to the what is really driving all of this, which is racism.
Yeah.
The 99% of the upset about immigrants being in the country would disappear instantly if these people were white, and that.
Well, then they'd pick on another group, though.
They'd find another
they'd
group to
find
pick
another
on.
Yeah,
but they might not find. They might have trouble finding another group to plausibly pick on that they would be able to get the same political benefit from. See,
Anti-Semitism's gone up. Think
well,
about a lot of
and
people.
they might try that.
And
But
that amazes me, that anti-Semitism is going up.
Well, it's never gone away. It's just been like a
never gone
lot of
away,
racism has
but-
been allowed to express itself now in this
But the thing is that
administration.
once
But
you
who cares if
once
you're
you create
Jewish?
an environment
A lot of
where you
people do,
tolerate
unfortunately.
hatred of any kind, all of the other kinds come along for the ride.
Yeah.
But you sit there and say, some of my good friends are Jewish, some of my good friends are Buddhist, some of my good friends are Muslim. I don't care.
But that's you. We're talking about the ignorance and the anger and the hatred out there that Trump has really tapped into.
'Cause I remember my oldest daughter came home one day, she was 7 years old, from YMCA in Hopkinton. And she said, Daddy, what's a Jew?
Mm-hmm.
And it just set me back saying,
Mm-hmm.
not a question I would expect from my 7-year-old.
Mm.
And I said, why? Well, make a long story short, her best friend Chelsea and her were playing, and kids came to her and said, you shouldn't play with Chelsea. And she said,
Oh.
why? She's a Jew. So Lexi came home and said, what's a Jew? I said, Jews are people who go to church on Saturday instead of Sunday. Other than that, minor differences.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, that's stupid. I said, right.
It is stupid.
Why would you care? But it just hit me when
Yes.
it became so simple to explain to her.
Mm-hmm.
Jews go to church. She didn't understand synagogue. But on Saturday, we go on Sunday. She said, that's stupid. Why should I care? I said, that's it. If
Precisely.
you like her,
Yeah.
play with her. If you don't, don't.
Right.
Shouldn't have anything
But
to
what's
do
the
with them.
motivation?
Well, I think human nature, if you probably talk to an anthropologist, they probably say there's always some sort of pecking order
Well,
that,
yeah.
sadly, that control, that overpowering someone, being in charge, and it almost seems as though, think about The Lord of the Flies, that book, the ugly part of human nature.
Well, a
But
lot of it, too,
Yeah.
you can be pro-Palestinian and not be an anti-Semite.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The
Because
few are mutually
Not all
exclusive.
Jews are Zionists.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Some of them actually don't think that the modern state of Israel was a good idea.
When I see what the Palestinians are living with,
I think any group of people should not be treated like that, period. There's no justification for it in my mind, but.
I was happy to see Trump stand up and say he's going to go against
Oh,
Netanyahu's
wait a minute.
policy.
What's in it for him?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I don't
We'll-
know that
we'll-
that's really
we'll see
happening.
what actually.
I hope.
Yeah, right.
I
No,
hope
he'll talk the talk, he
he's
doesn't
doing the
walk the
right
walk.
thing.
The important thing is
It's in
not
it for
to
him
pay
is
any
saving
attention.
people's lives.
He
The
doesn't
important-
care about anybody's lives, as far as I'm concerned. He cares about Trump. If anything he does spills over to some good from other people, it's strictly incidental and accidental. And I don't think that he takes a deliberate thing, let me do this policy because this will help other people. It's like, what can I
Well-
get out of this? And if it helps other people, that's great too.
Well, and the important thing is not to pay much of any attention to what he says.
Right,
What he says.
Well, that's any politician.
right. What do
and-
they do?
What do they do?
Right,
Right.
Because they all
Right.
come in with promises,
Mhm,
I'll
you're
end
right.
the war in a day.
yep.
Okay.
How's that going for him?
And anybody who believes that's even possible.
But a lot of people did apparently.
Most politicians, when talking about the war, would not say something like that because they would know perfectly well that no, you can't end something like that in a day, and it's not a good thing to promise because your odds of success are low.
It's so
But,
preposterous
Yeah.
you know,
that it could happen, yeah.
Right.
But the border somehow, how do you explain what happened on the border?
What?
We had
Specifically?
10 million people flooding over, thousands a day, and all of a sudden it's trickled down to none.
It was trickling down before, too, though.
It was trickling down before, after Biden got harsher on the border, but the bottom line really is that we're violating people's human rights here now. So we're not even allowing asylum claims to go through. And so what are people to do? Why would they enter the country and try to claim asylum when they're not being accepted at all?
Well, some of the asylum claims perplex me. You're in Mexico, and you want to claim asylum because you're in a dangerous place.
You're
Well-
coming from a dangerous place.
But you're already in Mexico.
Well, they were intending to come here, but
No,
they're
I
told-
understand what
the policy is they have to stay in Mexico or somewhere else before they come into our country.
Our policy,
Yes.
Yeah.
but not Mexico's. Mexico could keep them.
We cut a deal with Mexico to keep them for now until they resolve their asylum claims or at least have their day in court.
And
But
that, of
isn't
course,
even-
is
But they're
that
not
is-
getting a day in court.
is problematic
Right.
in Mexico as well. Mexico
Right.
doesn't always agree to that. Sometimes they agree to it, and sometimes they don't.
Exactly.
And but they did, under the Biden administration, introduce a pre-application process to be completed before you got to the border that would give you that would enable theoretically us to get started on your asylum claim in advance to cut down the time. It would also give you an early assessment of how relatively strong or weak your asylum claim was. And that may have had the effect of discouraging some people from coming, because what we've had up till now is, because there is nowhere near enough resources in the government to actually process the asylum claims, there is a huge backlog that goes on for years. There is an incentive to actually put in an application, even if it's not very strong, in hopes of being able to live and work in the United States for a couple of years. And then if you get rejected and have to go back to wherever you came, you're a couple of years of work in the United States to the good, even if you're not ultimately
Yeah,
successful.
but you're talking about 16-year-olds or kids.
Yeah,
The young man who got
Mhm.
picked up in Milford.
right.
I mean, saying he's Brazilian is like me saying I'm Portuguese.
Right.
I take pride in my heritage, and
Right.
I couldn't live in Portugal. I wouldn't know how to.
Right.
My mother
you could
came over
speak
here.
Portuguese there, but that
Well,
was only the
My
beginning
mother came
of what
over
you
to
have to know how
Milford
to
when
do.
she was 16 years old. She was here till she was 94. You couldn't put her back in Portugal and expect her
to
to
make
understand how to behave and live.
it. Yeah.
So, you know, the question that always bothers me is these kids, for whatever reason, they came over when they were this boy,
Mhm.
5 years old.
Right.
He's now 16, 17.
Mhm.
Sending him back to Brazil or his home country
Yeah.
just perplexes me
Uh,
because he's as American as anybody
They
else.
don't care
You-
about that.
It's perplexing you because you're trying to imagine that there is some way in which the people who are doing this think it's reasonable. And there isn't. You know, this is being done as part of cruelty and racism. That's what it's about. It's not about any kind of rational attempt to solve a problem.
They created the problem, and now they're
Right.
justifying the means
Right.
to fix it.
And it's the worst way to solve any problem also. Even if you thought it could be solved this way, it's the worst way to do it. We could increase the number of judges we have to process applications. We could have some law changes to make sure that kids like Marcelo are made citizens. We could have laws that make it easier to emigrate to the U.S. And one of the reasons why we have so many undocumented people here is because we make it so hard to immigrate
But
here.
isn't that the fundamental core issue?
Mhm.
We've admitted we need immigrants.
Right,
to run our economy.
Certainly.
right.
Okay, nobody's going to say there's enough Americans that'll do all the jobs. We don't need anybody. But we not making it easy to come over legitimately.
That's right.
Right.
And
You know, and my grandfather came here in '39 to Milford. He worked like a slave. I hate to use that term, but he worked very hard. He spent nothing because he saved every penny to send back to his wife and 3 daughters. But he came. He came legally. He put his head down, he worked, paid taxes, and made a place for his family. Shouldn't we be doing more of that?
Oh, theoretically,
absolutely.
sure.
And that's why, you know, Trump's rhetoric about the wall and all this mass deportation stuff is so incredibly harmful, because it simultaneously stigmatizes the immigrants who are here, and it you know, frankly wastes a lot of money and a lot of effort that we could be using to do more positive and constructive things. And and the way they're implementing this is obviously a direct assault on the Constitution. And so,
But some of the stuff you can't explain. It's like we had a hotel full of immigrants. And the children, we thought those 50 families, all those kids were going to come to Milford schools. Turns out they didn't have to. They could school choice into other schools,
right.
which to me is fine. But then I found out we passed a law that said Milford has to pay for transportation.
of the kids to those
if
other
they-
schools?
To the other towns.
Oh,
And I sat there and said, wait a minute. If I want to send my kid to a different town, I have to pay the transportation.
yeah. So,
It seems kind of lopsided.
well, so what's driving
familiar
what
with-
town has to pay seems to be what town actually had the accident of having the hotel they chose to use for this located in
Was
it.
that,
or something.
and I'm not familiar with that, when did that law get passed?
I don't know, I just saw it hit the budget last year and this year.
So that's
The
a
transportation
local
but-
ordinance.
There used to be, what is it, McKinty-Vinto law, that kids who were homeless had the option to remain in the school that they were last in. It was a way of trying to provide continuity
Yeah,
for
and I'm-
kids. And I don't know if that's what
And
you're
I'm all
referring
for, because
to,
I've been
but-
criticized when I got up at town meeting, and people were debating that we provide too many services,
Oh,
and
I
that's
know who
what
that
draws
person
the
was.
immigrants, like putting their kids in our schools. And I
I
said, wait a
remember
minute,
that.
first of all, our schools, define
Yeah.
our.
Yeah, who
Yeah.
is we?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
secondly,
And that's the
if
crux
these
of it.
kids bleed Milford red, we educate them.
I remember you talking about that. and
You
I
know, and people were
commend you
upset,
for
but I
getting
said-
up there.
You're not going to take it out on a kid. You know, the whole thing of providing medical care. I don't know of any of my friends who would see a hurt child, turn their back on him
Right.
or her, and walk away. It's not human nature.
And if you go to any of the other 32 OECD countries, if you were to get ill or broken arm or whatever, they would fix you up without charging you.
Yeah, the fundamental problem I have is I think on this healthcare with immigrants, we're being penny wise and pound foolish, because they go to the emergency room.
That's
And I'll
absolute-
use they
that's-
as the uninsured,
Right.
whether they're American citizens or
That's right.
immigrants.
Right.
So you get sniffles, and you ignore it because you can't get medical treatment. That
Right.
becomes pneumonia.
Now
and
you
now
need
all of a
medical-
sudden you go to the
Now you need
emergency
expensive
room.
medical
Yeah.
treatment.
Well, that's true of our poorer population too.
That's why I say it's not immigrant or American
Right.
citizens.
Right.
And so, so yeah, it's really all about the profit, right? So if we could reduce the profit incentive in healthcare, we would be much better off. It's just that we have so many corporations who have their hands
Well,
in our
I think
wallets.
there's something else going on here, though, and that is what we call drained pool politics in economics, which is,
Okay, you got to explain that to
Okay.
me. I'm old.
in the early 20th century, before air conditioning was widespread, the construction of public swimming pools was a big thing in a lot of the United States, and especially in hotter places like the South. Now these public pools were built with tax money, which came from everybody, but who do you think got allowed to use these schools? Do you think the black kids got to swim with the white kids in these pools? No.
Back then.
So along came the civil rights movement, and it was illegal to discriminate and refuse black people the right to swim in a public school in a public swimming pool that there's taxes and paid for. So a lot of towns, instead of saying, okay, we'll integrate the public swimming pool, filled it in instead. And so what this really is about is an unwillingness on the part of white citizens to have their taxes be used to support public services that are going to go to those folks. That is the subconscious thing that's going on here.
But
that causes us to be unable to have universal health care the way the rest of the civilized world does.
But you think about it, again, we got criticized on the FinCom for increasing the visiting nurses budget.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, well, you're just taking care of the immigrants.
Yeah.
Because they have TB. And I said, look, you can look at it that I'm just taking care of the immigrants, or you can look at it that I'm taking care of my kids.
Yeah.
Because if these children get
you're making
TB
my argument for me.
and they go into a public school, all of our children are at risk.
Now, sure.
Yes.
Now, I like to think we're voting for this because it's the right thing to do. It's a child,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to eliminate TB. But if you want to be self-centered, it's my grandkids in that room too.
Yeah. I actually don't want kids breathing on them that have got TB. Fancy that.
And likewise, it's the same story with the Department of Education, right? Because
Right.
we forced integration after the Brown v. Board decision, and the Department of Education was responsible for making sure that continued. And so for the last 40 years, the conservative movement has been plotting against the Department of Education for that reason. And they finally decided to get rid of it. And it's only because of that.
To reverse integration?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, think
Well,
about it. They
come on.
starve public schools.
Do you think you could get, sorry, Chris, do you think you could get enough people thinking that backwardly?
If you frame it a certain way, you can do it.
I think
Well,
so, Al. I mean, we've slowly been re-segregating as a society over the
Charter
last 40
schools,
years
private.
or so.
What about the school vouchers? People get school vouchers. They say, oh, you can send your kid to any school. People who have means that would normally send the kid to private school can use those vouchers, taxpayer dollars.
To supplement
to
tuition.
supplement. They don't need the supplement. They have a perfectly good
I was
public
going to say,
school.
people who are wealthy don't need the vouchers.
But that's
right.
what the vouchers do, and now you're starving out the public schools. Less funding. Look at, over the years, the teachers have had to supplement more and more of their classrooms. And now we have charter schools. It's another parallel system, taking dollars away from the public school.
Yeah, but the charter schools aren't just focusing on the wealthy.
No, but it gets taxpayer dollars, but they don't have to follow the same rules that public schools
Right.
do. And if a kid, they have a certain budget for the school year, and they go to the charter school. Now, October comes, I forgot the date, there's a cutoff date. And if the charter school after that date says, well, we can't educate this kid, we don't have the resources, the kid has to go back to the public school, but that money for that year doesn't follow that kid back to the public school. It stays with that charter school. So there's a lot of different ways that money is mismanaged. And
I won't argue
starving
there.
out the
In a
public
way
school.
that, right. And now we have the civil rights law being basically stood on its head, such that any kind of effort to provide special support to anybody is now interpreted as reverse discrimination.
Yeah.
And so it's you know, they're basically just, we made an effort starting in the 60s and 70s to make the country more fair and less racist. And all of those efforts kind of reached a plateau, and we've been backsliding ever since. And
But in theory, prejudice is prejudice.
prejudice can breed in the sewers, though.
I mean, I can
you know,
see
it can
some
get
Asian
worse.
American families getting upset that their children weren't accepted to certain schools because there were too many Asians.
Is that their perception or is that the reality?
No,
too?
apparently at Harvard, they did the studies and it was reality.
So were they accepted because of their ethnicity or because of their
They were
ability?
rejected because of their ethnicity.
Too many
They're-
Asians?
yeah. Well, and
And again, you
because-
can argue that Harvard's argument that they want a diverse
yeah.
class has merit,
Mhm.
unless you're the kid who didn't get in because you're
So the-
Portuguese and, you know.
So not everybody, and I'm speaking as a Harvard graduate actually, not everybody, there's not enough room at Harvard for everybody. But what there does need to be is enough room for, is enough slots that are quality educational slots for everybody. And so that everybody can be educated to their full potential. And we could be doing better in that area, you know, and there are, you know, I have a love-hate relationship with the Ivy League because, you know, while it was incredibly stimulating, it also, you know, those schools do serve as kind of finishing schools for upper-class kids.
Yep.
And I met a bunch of them in my freshman year because they plunked me in with.
Well, the next time we get together, let's make sure one of the topics we talk about is Milford's move to Chapter 74. That's adding vocational education
To the high
to
school.
Milford High.
As
Okay.
opposed to keeping it at the.
Well, BVT,
yeah.
when I was growing up, 8th grade, you made your decision. Did you want to be a tradesman? You went to BVT.
Right.
Mhm.
If you wanted to go to college, you went to Milford High.
Mhm.
But now, and I've
BVT
said it
does.
so many times, put my father in the organic chemistry class, he would not have done well. Give the man a tool, he's an artist.
Yeah.
But the kids, you have to be in the top 10, 15%.
They cherry pick the kids and they have
Oh.
a high percentage of graduates that
So
go
you
on
had to be in the
college.
top academic slice
Uh-huh.
to
Yeah.
make it to BVT. So Milford made the pitch that
Yeah.
we want to add VOTEC to Milford High, not to compete with BVT.
But give kids that stay there an opportunity to have classes if they're not going to go to
We'll
college.
give kids that
Right.
don't get into BVT a chance to be
Right.
a carpenter or a plumber.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah.
And there was some pressure put on some of these places like BVT to move more towards a lottery system or
Yes.
you know, a system that would allow more kids into their school, but they've declined to go in that direction.
Well, hopefully it's getting better, and we'll take our steps.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll get together again and continue.
Did we solve the world's problems yet?
As always, thanks for joining us. May God bless. May tomorrow be a better day than tonight. And let's hope that our 6 loyal viewers have a better week. This heat has been killing everybody. I can't use the word killing. It's been inconveniencing everybody. But overall, we're lucky to be here in Milford. Good night, all.
Amen.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just